at great length, but a short but sharp discussion through a panel where we bring together both the public policy makers on the European side, on the Korean side, and the standardization bodies in the European Union and in Korea. So this will be animated by my colleague, Dr. Kramer, who I'm sure you all know. He's our representative with Korea and with Japan. Stefan.
Yes, thank you very much, Tony, for the introductory words. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Maybe I'd like to introduce three colleagues who are new to the panel. There's Bernard Barani, who is the Deputy Head of Unit for Future Connectivity Systems at the European Commission in Brussels. We also meet now for the first time Emilio Davila Gonzalez, who is the head of the ICT standardization sector at DG Connect. And then, of course, we welcome Professor Hyunwoo Lee, who's the Vice Chair of the TTA Working Group 11. Maybe by way of housekeeping, I would like to encourage participants of today's workshop to introduce any questions you may have to the panelists into the Q&A field. And I will regularly check the Q&A, whether there are any open questions, and I will put these questions immediately to the panelists. But as there are no questions at this very moment, I'd like to begin the question and answer session by putting a question to David Boswasik, but also to Dr. Chung. I'd like to focus today's discussion a little bit on the more on the cooperation aspect, on the EU-Japan, EU-Korea cooperation aspect. I mean, you have in this workshop identified multi-access edge computing and reconfigurable intelligent surfaces as important building blocks for advanced 5G and 6G. And I wonder, why did you choose specifically those two building blocks for EU-Korea cooperation? And are there perhaps other building blocks which come to mind when we call for an enhanced cooperation between the EU and Korea on advanced 5G and 6G? David Boswasik, if you could perhaps go first, and then I would like to ask Dr. Chung to come in. Thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, well, the choice of MEC and RIS is quite interesting. It wasn't me that made the choice, but it's an interesting choice. MEC was one of the original 5G building block technologies. ISG MEC has been around for over 6 years, I would assume. And it was to take innovative research into pre-standards and then onto standards, and that worked quite well. A number of research projects fed into MEC, a number of corporate research activities fed into MEC, and then the important thing was to feed that work into 3GPP. That has worked quite well for 5G and will continue to work for 5G Advanced. What we're looking at now is how to look at potentially beyond 5G building block technologies, and I think the only one or the only two that everybody agrees around the globe is that 6G may include terahertz and 6G will include AI. Those are about the only fully.
You've just inadvertently muted yourself, David.
I pressed the wrong button, excuse me. RIS is interesting because it's potentially a beyond 5G building block. It could be used in 5G Advanced as well. And it's also usable at multiple frequencies. So you can say RIS could be used at terahertz, but it could be used at lower frequencies as well. What we'd like to do now is encourage more 6G building block research activities to begin feeding their output into European standards and then global standards. RIS is the first attempt. We're thinking possibly terahertz would be a second area. Areas such as optical wireless communications, non-terrestrial networks. There are a lot of key technologies which have been identified. Now it really is about accelerating the output of research. I think is really the important area, accelerating the output of research through pre-standards and on to full global standards in 3GPP. So MEC being a 5G building block, RIS being a 6G building block, and I believe in the next session you will hear more about ISG RIS. I hope that answered.
Thank you very much, David. Dr. Chung, I'd be intrigued to hear your take on the same question. Why is it these two building blocks, and are there perhaps others who are susceptible to EU-Korea cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And as you mentioned, I think also RIS is a promising building block for beyond the 5G and 6G. And it is also considerable to connect RIS with the UAV as well. So in the future, maybe it would be good to share some both R&D status and then standardization point of view. And the other is very similar opinion from David. Would be sub-terahertz and AI machine learning technologies. In just personal point of view, every time considering every time a new generation occurred, there were new frequency pioneer and new technology as well. So those technologies maybe would be building blocks for 6G. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. I would now again focus a little more on the question of future joint research between the EU and Korea. And David had already introduced all participants to the Smart Networks and Services, a joint undertaking, which will play a very important role in also in research collaboration. My question to Bernard Barani would be that which topics would you consider important for EU-Korea cooperation under this Smart Networks and Services undertaking? And what kind of format and funding mechanism do you have in mind? Would you consider a specific co-funding mechanism to support such joint research? And what kind of results would you have in mind? Thank you, Bernard. This question goes to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Stefan. I try to be short for a complicated question. And first of all, I would like to say a few introductory statements before diving into your question. First of all, I believe that whatever the partner for cooperation, it's very, very, very important that we share a common vision. As was said already by several speakers, final vision is not yet there. It's something which is being worked on, and we know that the ITU timeline for delivering a vision document is early next year, 2023. At this moment in time, we will have the equivalent of the IMT 2083 recommendation of ITU that delivered the famous triangle, EMBB, MMTC, and URLLC. So once you have that, it's not enough. I think we need to have a common understanding of the common use cases that we want to develop. In 5G, we had this situation there. Half of the planet went EMBB. On our side in Europe, we are more focused on the industrial use cases, Industry 4.0 or vertical type of applications. And this has had a certain impact on how the agenda has been driven into the standardization bodies. So we believe that the more we can align the use cases upfront, and the more we can do that jointly, the most efficient the standardization system will be, because we will all work on the same ecosystem creation rather than having some people working on some part of the ecosystems and some people working on another part of the ecosystem. So for us, that's very important. The third element is that we agree on the timeline. The timeline is very, very important, and that we have we don't take the standardization timeline hostages of some key milestones such as Olympic Games or World Cup event here and there, which will eventually have adverse effect on how the standardization is being kind of treated or rushed, maybe not necessarily rushed to the interest of the common players. So with this in mind, I would say that for standardization bodies or topics that are of interest to us, there are the usual aspects that we may want to cooperate, like a radio, core network, whatever. One thing which is very important to us, which is maybe a little bit new compared to what we did with 5G, are the societal issues, and I take two examples. The first one is that, as you know, we want to couple our research and development agenda and cooperation agenda to clear policies of the Union. One very clear policy in the Green Deal and the Sustainable Development Goals, which are related to that. So in our view, it's very important to have common understanding on how in the future these future platforms can contribute to climate change or to, let's say, sustainability type of issues at large. And the second element is security, which we believe with the cybersecurity toolbox that the Union has, let's say, adopted, is something which is becoming more and more important. And in 6G or whatever beyond 5G comes across, will be more important, taking into account that we will see that more and more networks are implemented across different domains, be they business domains or technological domains. So we will have parts of the network in verticals, part with an MNO, part in an hyperscaler, part in whatever. So there will be lots of heterogeneous implementation of networks, which will be very difficult to ensure end-to-end security and end-to-end, let's say, harmonious view. And this is an element that we will have, that will create also a lot of difficulties for implementation of AI from, let's say, end-to-end perspective. Today, we have AI already in 5G, which is being considered, and 3GPP has made some proposals on that, on how you implement AI in the core, in the RAN, in various bits and pieces. What will be important in the future, if we want to move towards what people call AI native architecture, will be to have a kind of common end-to-end view of AI, what AI can deliver into the network, in such a way that you don't have these possibilities that we can have today, that you have an AI decision in the core, which is potentially conflicting with an AI decision in the RAN. So at some stage, you need to have a unified view of everything which is AI related in the network. And this will be a strong research topic where we believe we will need international cooperation, because this is something that has this kind of overview that reconciles a lot of heterogeneous domain. And here we believe that in Korea, we are a little bit in the same situation than, or in Europe, we are a little bit in the same situation as in Korea, where we can have a very joint interest in the sense that we don't have the large hyperscalers that we see in the US. So we may want to develop common positions to this part of the equation. So SNS, as you said, will be a vehicle for us to handle this type of questions. We will move this subject, possibly, this is still to be discussed with the industry association 6GIA, to the next work program. That means the work program that we need will start in 2023 on the basis of CSA, a coordination action, as we call it, that will guide us into the type of research that we want to develop further or dive deeper with third countries. And that will be the funding mechanism that we will use. I'm sorry, I was a bit long.
Thank you very much. That was an extremely comprehensive answer. If I could ask also Dr. Choi again to focus on the cooperation aspect in your answer. What kind of co-funding mechanism are there on the Korean side for joint research? And perhaps an additional aspect, how would you, or do you actually factor in a possible association of Korea to the Horizon Europe program? Dr. Choi, please.
Yeah, this is Song. We, as I presented, we have already started the 6G project within Korea. So Korea entities, private sectors and R&D sectors started the project. And we also started collaboration with America and also China for the 6G project. So we, as we did for 5G, we wanted to continue the collaboration with Europe as a co-funding. So your question is about the co-funding mechanism. So in Korea, we had set up the co-funding mechanism based on our previous experience with the EU. So we don't have any other different type of the co-funding mechanism as different from our previous collaboration. So we wanted to understand whether EU has a different mechanism or not. So we will prepare some funding for a project for R&D. We wanted to narrow down the concrete scope for the project, and EU and Korea will support those projects as a co-funding project. So based on the discussion on this year between two countries, we can start the project from next year. So we wish to have more close discussion how to make progress on this collaboration.
Thank you very much. I have a final question going to Professor Hyun-Woo Lee and Emilio, who's also on the panel. It's a slightly more strategic question, but if I may ask you to give us a brief answer in the interest of time. I wonder what is the demarcation line between standards cooperation, what we're talking about today, and standards competition on beyond 5G and 6G, and is there perhaps already competition between individual standards bodies, or are there standards bodies who tend to form alliances on how 6G will look like in the future? So Professor Lee, if I could have your answer, please.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for important issues. In general, the standard demarcation standard will be similar to previous generation of 4G or 5G. So, for example, in stage 1 and stage 2, in terms of 3G terminology, we may need more cooperation. But after stage 3, we should experience competition, and also in interoperability test or marketing, the competition is indispensable. However, in case of 6G, I think I would like to add one more thing, that in the stage of setting up the vision and setting up high level the definition stage, we need to collaborate as well. So that is my answer to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Tony was already alluding to the new standardization strategy of the Commission. So Emilio, could you perhaps put this all into perspective? Thank you. I think you're still on mute. No, Amelia, while you're trying to perhaps connect the sound, I will have one last look into the Q&A box. There is no question from the audience. Emilia, perhaps you will have another chance to respond or elaborate on the question, because there will be another panel discussion. In the interest of time and with many thanks to the panelists, I'll hand back to Tony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and all the panelists. I think indeed this was, this in a sense concludes the first part of today's workshop, namely, which was really all about identifying what is the vision that we have for beyond 5G/6G in the European Union and Korea, looking at the research and development aspects, looking at the standardization aspects, looking at the public authorities and the standardization bodies and the industrial stakeholders' perspectives, and looking at areas where there can be cooperation. So I think this was already a very, very, very useful update to the first workshop, which was held in 2021, but we're starting to see how the areas are getting clearer. The areas for cooperation are getting clearer.